She watched her stepmother's hands move with deliberate cruelty, each birthday gift crashing into the garbage can one after another. The books her father had carefully chosen during his lunch break at the Dollar General. The music box with painted birds that spun when you opened the lid. The gray stuffed rabbit she had hugged against her chest just 20 minutes before, its soft fur still warm from her embrace. 9 years old, and everything Sadie Brennan owned that mattered was being buried under coffee grounds and rotting banana peels. She could not scream. Terror had stolen her voice the same way Vivian Holt had stolen her joy, the same way cancer had stolen her mother 2 years ago, leaving behind an emptiness that no amount of birthday presents could ever fill. Vivian dusted off her manicured hands with the satisfaction of someone completing an unpleasant but necessary chore. Her blonde hair caught the last light of the Arizona evening, and her blue eyes held nothing but contempt as she turned to face the trembling child. The evening air carried the scent of juniper and pine from the Bradshaw Mountains. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack, and in the modest house on Copper Basin Road in Prescott, Arizona, a little girl learned that birthdays could be weapons and gifts could become garbage in the hands of someone who had never wanted her in the first place. This is the story of how four men on motorcycles changed everything. Four men the world called dangerous. Four men who would prove that sometimes the real monsters wear designer clothes and perfect smiles, while the angels ride Harley Davidsons and wear leather vests covered in patches. 2 years earlier, this same house had been filled with warmth and laughter and the smell of chocolate cake baking in the oven. Lorelei Brennan had a tradition. Every June 14th, she would wake before dawn to start the birthday cake for her daughter. Not a store-bought cake with plastic decorations and artificial frosting, but a real cake made with real butter and real love, and 3 layers of chocolate that took all morning to perfect. Sadie would stumble into the kitchen around 7, still rubbing sleep from her green eyes, and find her mother elbow-deep in buttercream frosting. Flour-dusted Lorelei's dark hair, chocolate smeared across her cheek, and she would laugh, that musical laugh that Sadie could still hear sometimes in her dreams, and pull her daughter close for a flower-covered hug. Together, they would decorate the cake with buttercream flowers, roses and daisies and little forget-me-nots in pink and yellow and blue. Sadie's flowers always looked lopsided compared to her mother's perfect creations, but Lorelei never criticized. She would simply smile and say that the lopsided ones were her favorites because they were made with the most love. Those birthdays had been magical. Her father Garrett would come home from his shift at the copper mine covered in dust, but grinning from ear to ear. He would swing Sadie up onto his shoulders and parade her around the living room like she was a princess and he was her loyal knight. Lorelei would light the candles on the cake they had made together, and the 3 of them would sing so off-key that the neighbors probably wondered if someone was torturing a cat. Sadie had never known that happiness could be temporary. She had never understood that the people you love most could be taken from you without warning or explanation or fairness. The cancer came quietly at first, a cough that would not go away, tiredness that no amount of sleep could fix, weight loss that made Lorelei's wedding ring slip off her finger if she was not careful. Then the diagnosis. Stage 4. Metastatic. Words that meant nothing to a 7-year-old girl, but everything to the parents who heard them spoken in a sterile hospital room with fluorescent lights humming overhead. Lorelei fought. She fought with chemotherapy that made her hair fall out in clumps. She fought with radiation that burned her skin and stole her appetite. She fought with every ounce of strength in her body because she had a daughter who needed her, and a husband who loved her, and a life that she was not ready to leave behind. But cancer does not care about love. Cancer does not care about birthday cakes or buttercream flowers or little girls who still need their mothers. Cancer takes what it wants and leaves behind only absence. Lorelei Brennan died on a Tuesday afternoon in September, with Garrett holding one hand and Sadie holding the other. Her last words were for her daughter. Remember that I love you. Remember that you are brave and strong and good. Remember that nothing, not even death, can take away what we had together. Sadie remembered. She remembered everything. The smell of her mother's perfume, the sound of her laughter, the way she hummed while she cooked and sang while she cleaned and told bedtime stories with different voices for each character. She remembered, and the remembering hurt worse than anything she had ever experienced. Garrett Brennan did not handle his wife's death well. He threw himself into work at the copper mine in Jerome, volunteering for double shifts and overnight rotations. Anything to avoid coming home to a house that still smelled like Lorelei's shampoo. Anything to escape the empty chair at the dinner table and the silence where her voice used to be. He loved Sadie. That was never in question. But grief had hollowed him out, left him a shell of the man he used to be. He moved through the days like a ghost, present in body, but absent in every way that mattered. 6 months after Lorelei's death, Garrett met Vivian Holt at a church support group for widowers. She was beautiful in a polished magazine cover way that was nothing like Lorelei's natural warmth. She dressed in expensive clothes and drove a nice car and said all the right things about understanding loss and wanting to help. Garrett was lonely and broken and desperate for someone to fill the void. Vivian was calculating and patient and very good at appearing to be exactly what he needed. They married after a 4-month courtship. Vivian moved into the house on Copper Basin Road with her designer luggage and her cold blue eyes and her smile that never quite reached past her lips. Sadie knew from the beginning that something was wrong. She could feel it in the way Vivian looked at her when Garrett was not watching. She could hear it in the sharp edge beneath Vivian's sweet words. She could sense it the way animals sense an approaching storm with an instinct that required no proof or explanation. But she was 7 years old and her father seemed happier than he had been in months, and who would believe a grieving child over a charming woman who had brought casseroles to the church potluck and volunteered at the library book sale. The first time Vivian hurt Sadie was 3 weeks after the wedding. Garrett had left for his night shift at the mine and Sadie had accidentally spilled a glass of milk at the dinner table. Such a small thing. Such an insignificant accident. Vivian's hand shot out faster than a striking snake. Her fingers closed around Sadie's upper arm with crushing force. Her nails dug into the soft skin, hard enough to leave crescent-shaped marks that would fade by morning. "Do you have any idea how hard I work to keep this house clean?" Vivian's voice was low and venomous. Nothing like the honey-sweet tone she used in front of Garrett. "You are a clumsy, thoughtless, ungrateful little brat. Clean this up. Now." Sadie cleaned up the milk with shaking hands. She did not tell her father. How could she? Vivian had not technically hit her. The marks would be gone before Garrett woke up. And besides, he seemed so happy now, so much more like his old self. Sadie could not bear to take that away from him. So she stayed quiet, and the quiet became a prison. Over the following 18 months, Vivian perfected her technique. She never left marks where Garrett could see them. She never raised her voice when there was any chance of being overheard. She was meticulous in her cruelty, targeting Sadie's emotions rather than her body, wearing down the child's spirit with 1,000 small cuts that no one else could see. "You are a burden. You are the reason your father is always so tired. He works himself to death because of you, because you eat his food and live in his house and give nothing back. Your mother died because she was weak and pathetic and unable to fight. You will end up just like her if you are not careful. If you tell your father any of this, I will make sure he believes you are a liar. I will have you sent away to a special school for troubled children. Is that what you want, to never see your father again?" Sadie believed her. Children believe the adults in their lives, especially when those adults speak with such conviction and certainty. Vivian said these things as if they were facts, as immutable as gravity or the rising of the sun. And Sadie, who had already lost her mother and could not bear to lose her father, too accepted them as truth. She became invisible. That was the only way to survive. She learned to move through the house with sighing out making a sound. She learned to anticipate Vivian's moods by the set of her shoulders and the tightness around her eyes. She learned to be small and silent and absent, a ghost in her own home. The June 14th that would change everything arrived with the sharp brightness of an Arizona summer. Sadie woke at dawn out of habit, some remnant of the birthday mornings she used to share with her mother. For a few seconds, still caught between sleep and waking, she thought she could smell chocolate cake baking in the oven. Then reality crashed back in. Her mother was dead. Her father had probably already left for his early shift at the mine. And downstairs, Vivian would be waiting with her cold eyes and her sharp words and her endless capacity for making Sadie feel worthless. 9 years old today. Sadie did not feel like celebrating. She dressed in her faded pink dress, the one her mother had bought her 3 birthdays ago. It was too short now, hitting above her knees instead of below them, and the fabric was worn thin at the elbows. But it was the last birthday present her mother had ever given her, and Sadie wore it every June 14th like armor against the day. The house was quiet when she descended the stairs. Too quiet. Vivian's heels usually clicked against the hardwood floors by this hour, a staccato rhythm that warned of her presence and her mood. Sadie crept into the kitchen and found a note on the counter in her father's handwriting. Picked up an extra shift. Home around 7. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Love, Dad. Her heart sank. Another birthday without her father present. Another celebration postponed or forgotten or squeezed into the margins of his exhausting work schedule. She understood why he worked so hard. The mortgage payment and the medical bills from her mother's treatment and the everyday expenses of keeping a family alive. But understanding did not stop the loneliness from settling into her bones like winter cold. She made herself a bowl of cereal and ate it standing at the kitchen window, watching the gray clouds roll over the Bradshaw Mountains. The weather matched her mood. Heavy and dark and threatening rain that might or might not fall. Vivian appeared around 10, emerging from the master bedroom in her silk robe with her hair still mussed from sleep. She walked past Sadie without acknowledgement, poured herself a cup of coffee, and settled into the living room with her phone and her total indifference. The day crawled by. Sadie retreated to her bedroom and sketched in the margins of her school notebook the only paper she had that Vivian had not thrown away or forbidden. She drew the mountains and the deer that sometimes wandered into their yard and a memory of her mother's face that she was terrified of forgetting. At 6:30, the rumble of her father's truck came up the gravel driveway. Sadie ran to the window and watched him climb out his work clothes covered in copper dust, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. But he was carrying something. 4 boxes wrapped in cheerful paper with daisies and sunflowers printed on them. He had remembered. Despite everything, despite the double shifts and the bone-deep tiredness, he had remembered her birthday. Sadie flew down the stairs and met him at the front door. Garrett's weathered face broke into a genuine smile when he saw her, the first real smile she had seen from him in weeks. "There is my birthday, girl." He set down the packages and wrapped her in a hug that smelled like copper and sweat, and the father she remembered from before. 9 years old. How did that happen? "I do not know," Sadie said against his chest. "It just did." The living room transformed with those 4 modest gifts on the coffee table. Vivian emerged from wherever she had been hiding, her face arranged in an expression of pleasant interest that Sadie had learned to recognize as entirely false. "Well," Vivian said in her honey-sweet company voice. "What do we have here?" Garrett settled onto the couch with a grunt of exhaustion. "Open them, sweetheart. I hope I picked out okay." Sadie's fingers trembled as she reached for the first package. The yellow paper with daisies crinkled under her hands, and for a moment she was back in the kitchen, with her mother flower on their noses, laughter filling the air. Inside was a sketchbook, a real one, not the cheap kind from the school supply aisle, but a proper sketchbook with thick paper and a spiral binding, and a cover that showed a mountain landscape. Next to it was a set of colored pencils, 24 different shades arranged in a rainbow inside a tin case. Sadie's breath caught in her throat. She had wanted art supplies for so long, had hinted and hoped and dreamed, and her father had noticed, despite everything he had noticed. The second box contained 3 paperback books from the library's used sale, adventure stories about brave girls who went on quests and solved mysteries and proved that they were stronger than anyone expected. The kind of books Sadie devoured whenever she could get her hands on them. The third held a small stuffed rabbit with soft gray fur and long floppy ears and black button eyes that seemed to look right into her soul. It reminded her of the rabbit in one of her mother's bedtime stories, the one who was afraid of everything until he discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The fourth and final gift was a music box. When Sadie opened the lid, a gentle melody played, while tiny painted birds spun in circles on a mirrored surface. It was beautiful and delicate, and exactly the kind of thing her mother would have chosen for her. "These are perfect," Sadie breathed, clutching the rabbit to her chest. "Thank you so much, Daddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Garrett's tired eyes softened with love. "You are welcome, baby girl. I wish I could have done more. I know birthdays were always special with your mom, and I know I have not been around enough lately." "This is enough," Sadie said, and she meant it with her whole heart. "This is more than enough." Vivian watched the exchange with a smile that showed too many teeth and not enough warmth. "Garrett," she said, using the formal version of his name that she preferred, "we need to discuss your spending habits in the kitchen." Now. The words fell like stones into still water. Garrett's smile faded. He glanced at Sadie with something like apology in his eyes before following his wife into the other room. Through the thin walls, Sadie could hear the argument building. Vivian's sharp whispers growing into harsh accusations about money and priorities and unnecessary indulgences for a spoiled child who already had everything she needed. Garrett's responses were quieter, defensive, but weak, the words of a man too exhausted to fight. Sadie carefully gathered her presents. She carried them upstairs to her room and arranged them on her bed like precious treasures. The music box played its sweet tune, and she let herself imagine that her mother was there humming along, telling her that everything would be okay. The imagination lasted until the sound of her father's truck rumbled out of the driveway. He was going back to work. Another night shift. Another birthday evening spent alone with Vivian. Sadie heard the sharp click of heels on the stairs exactly 10 minutes after Garrett left. She knew because she had been counting the seconds, her heart beating faster, with each one her hands clutching the stuffed rabbit so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The bedroom door opened without a knock. Vivian stood in the doorway, her arms crossed over her silk blouse, her blue eyes sweeping across the gifts spread on the bedspread. Something dark and hungry flickered in those eyes, something that made Sadie's stomach clench with fear. "Your father spoils you." Vivian's voice had shed its honey-sweet coating. The words came out sharp and venomous the way they always did when Garrett was not around to hear. "Do you have any idea how hard I work to keep this household running while he throws money away on garbage for an ungrateful child? I am not ungrateful." Sadie's voice came out small and thin, barely above a whisper. "I said thank you. Do not talk back to me." Vivian crossed the room in 3 quick strides. Her hands shot out and snatched the sketchbook from where it lay on the bed. She held it up like evidence at a trial. "These things are making you lazy and entitled. You sit in your room drawing pictures while I clean and cook and manage everything. You contribute nothing to this family. Nothing. And then you expect to be rewarded with expensive presents?" "They were not expensive," Sadie said, her voice cracking. "Daddy got them at Dollar General. He said he found them during his lunch break." "I do not care where he found them." Vivian's fingers tightened on the sketchbook until the cover bent. "You need to learn that life is not about getting whatever you want just because you exist. You need to understand that actions have consequences." "Please." Sadie reached for the sketchbook. "Those are mine. Daddy gave them to me." Vivian gathered all 4 gifts into her arms. The books, the rabbit, the music box, the sketchbook, and colored pencils. She moved with efficient brutality, ignoring Sadie's pleading deaf to her tears. "You do not deserve these. Maybe when you learn some gratitude and respect, your father will understand not to waste his hard-earned money on a selfish, worthless child." "No, please do not." Sadie jumped up from the bed, reaching for her belongings. But Vivian was already heading toward the stairs. The 9-year-old followed, tears streaming down her cheeks, her faded pink dress catching on the worn wooden banister. "Please do not take them. They are my birthday presents. Please. I will do anything. I will be good. I promise I will be good." Vivian did not respond. She did not even slow down. She marched through the kitchen, opened the back door, and walked across the yard to where the large garbage bins stood near the weathered wooden fence. The evening air was cool despite the Arizona summer, carrying the scent of juniper from the surrounding hills. Storm clouds gathered over the mountains, and the first drops of rain had begun to fall, darkening the dry earth in scattered patches. Sadie stood in the doorway, watching in horror as Vivian opened the garbage bin and began throwing everything inside. The sketchbook landed first with a heavy thud. Coffee grounds from that morning's breakfast splattered across its pristine cover. The music box went next. The delicate mechanism cracked on impact, and the gentle melody cut off mid-note silence forever. The books fell in a scattered heap, their pages bending and tearing as they hit the rotting food and wet refuse. The stuffed rabbit went last. Vivian held it up for a moment, its button eyes seeming to meet Sadie's across the distance, before dropping it into the darkness of the trash. Sadie could not move, could not breathe, could not process what she had just witnessed. Her birthday presents the only evidence that her father still loved her, still remembered her, still saw her as something worth celebrating. Gone, buried in garbage like they meant nothing, like she meant nothing. There. Vivian dusted off her hands with the same satisfied gesture she used after scrubbing the bathroom or taking out the recycling. "Now maybe you will learn to appreciate what you have instead of constantly wanting more. She walked back toward the house, her heels leaving small divots in the rain-softened earth. When she reached the doorway where Sadie still stood frozen, she paused. Go to bed. Her voice was flat, final, emptied of even the pretense of feeling. And if you tell your father about this, I will make sure he knows what an ungrateful, manipulative little liar you are. He will believe me, not you. Wives outrank daughters. That is simply how the world works. She brushed past Sadie without another glance and disappeared into the house. A moment later, the lock clicked on the back door. Sadie stood alone in the cooling air, rain beginning to soak through her faded pink dress, staring at the garbage bin that held everything her father had given her. Everything she had left of this birthday. Everything that proved, even for a few hours, that someone still cared. She did not know how long she stayed there. Long enough for the rain to plaster her hair to her face. Long enough for her tears to mix with the drops falling from the sky until she could not tell which was which. Eventually, she stumbled back inside through the front door that Vivian had forgotten to lock. She climbed the stairs to her room, threw herself onto her bed, and cried into her pillow until she had no tears left. Outside her window, the Arizona night settled over Prescott. Stars emerged in the vast darkness above the mountains, ancient and indifferent to the small tragedy playing out in the house on Copper Basin Road. Somewhere her birthday presents lay buried in garbage along with her happiness, her hope, and the last of her faith that things might someday get better. Morning came the way it always did, bright and hot and merciless. Sadie had barely slept. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her throat ached from the sounds she had tried to muffle with her pillow. She waited in her room until she heard Vivian's car start in the driveway. Weekly hair appointment in town. 2 hours of freedom, maybe more if Vivian stopped for lunch with her friends afterward. The moment the sound of the engine faded down Copper Basin Road, Sadie crept downstairs and out the back door. The storm had passed overnight, leaving the air fresh and clean and the earth damp with moisture. The garbage bin stood against the fence, baking already in the morning sun. She had to try. She knew the presents were probably ruined, knew that nothing could undo what Vivian had done. But some desperate part of her needed to see them again. Needed to hold the rabbit one more time, even if its fur was matted with garbage. Needed to trim him. Sadie dragged an old wooden crate from the garden shed and positioned it beside the bin. The lid was heavy, almost too heavy for her 9-year-old arms, but she managed to push it open. The smell hit her immediately. Coffee grounds and rotting banana peels and something sour that she did not want to identify. She gagged, but forced herself to look inside. There, beneath yesterday's dinner scraps and discarded junk mail, she could see the corner of her sketchbook. The yellow paper with the daisies was torn and stained, but the sketchbook itself might still be salvageable. She leaned into the bin, stretching her arm as far as it would reach. Her fingers brushed the spiral binding of the sketchbook. Just a little further, just a few more inches. The sound of motorcycle engines made her freeze. Not one motorcycle, several. The deep, thunderous rumble of Harley-Davidsons coming down Copper Basin Road getting louder as they approached. Sadie pulled back from the garbage bin, clutching the edge to keep her balance on the crate. She watched as 4 motorcycles turned into the driveway of the house next door. The property had been empty for months, ever since old Mr. Davidson passed away and his children had put it up for rent. The bikes were massive things, chrome gleaming in the morning sunlight, their engines growling like captive thunder. The riders wore leather vests covered in patches that she could not quite read from this distance. They moved with the easy confidence of men who were used to being watched and had stopped caring about the watching long ago. The lead rider killed his engine and removed his helmet. He was a big man, maybe her father's age or a little older, with a graying beard and arms covered in tattoos that told stories in ink and color. His vest bore a patch that made Sadie's breath catch in her chest. Hell's Angels. Arizona. She had heard whispers about Hell's Angels. Vivian had made comments about those criminals and dangerous thugs whenever news reports mentioned motorcycle clubs. The few times Sadie had seen bikers in town, she had watched people cross to the other side of the street and hurry their children away, as if the leather-clad men were wolves among sheep. But the man who had just removed his helmet did not look like a wolf. He looked tired and weathered and human, with brown eyes that seemed to hold more sadness than menace. Those eyes landed on Sadie. She was balanced precariously on the crate, her upper body leaning into the garbage bin, her face streaked with tears she had not realized were still falling. She must have looked pathetic. She must have looked like exactly what she was. A child in crisis. You okay there, kid? His voice surprised her, gentle, concerned. Nothing like the growl she had expected from someone who looked like he could bench press a car. Sadie scrambled down from the crate, landing awkwardly on the damp ground. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, succeeding only in smearing dirt across her cheeks. I am fine, she said, the lie automatic. The biker walked closer to the fence that separated their properties. Up close, she could see his face more clearly, weathered by sun and wind and years of riding open roads, marked by scars that spoke of a life lived hard and without apology, but kind. Under all of it, undeniably kind. You sure about that? He nodded toward the garbage bin. You were elbow deep in trash and crying. That does not usually go with fine. Sadie hesitated. Vivian's warnings echoed in her head. Do not tell anyone. No one will believe you. You will only make things worse. But something about this stranger made her feel less afraid than she had felt in months. Maybe it was the genuine concern in his voice. Maybe it was the way he kept his distance, respecting the fence between them, not pushing or demanding. Maybe it was simply that she was so tired of carrying this weight alone that even a dangerous stranger seemed better than the isolation she had been drowning in. My birthday presents, she finally said. Her voice came out raw and broken, barely above a whisper. They got thrown away. The man's expression shifted. His jaw tightened slightly, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Not anger at her, anger for her. Thrown away. Somebody threw away your birthday presents. Sadie nodded, unable to speak around the lump forming in her throat. When is your birthday? Yesterday? The man exhaled slowly through his nose. Behind him, his three companions had parked their bikes and were unloading boxes from their saddlebags. But Sadie noticed that they kept glancing over, curious about the conversation their leader was having with a tearful child by a garbage bin. What is your name, kid? Sadie. Sadie Brennan. I am Colt Ashford. He gestured to the house behind him, the Davidson place that had been empty for so long. Looks like we are going to be neighbors. Me and my brothers are moving some of our club equipment into this place we are renting. He paused, studying her with those sad, knowing eyes. Sadie, did your parents throw your birthday presents in the garbage? She shook her head quickly, some instinct warning her to protect her father even now. My daddy gave them to me. He works at the copper mine in Jerome. He picked them out special during his lunch break. She took a shaky breath. My mom died 2 years ago. Cancer, my stepmother, she is the one who, the words caught in her throat. She could not finish the sentence. Did not need to. Colt's face grew more serious. He turned to his companions and called out, Flint, Buckley, Shepard, come here a minute. The three men approached the fence. One was tall and lean with a bald head that gleamed in the sun and the wiry build of someone who had survived things most people only saw in movies. Another was shorter but powerfully built, with a red beard so thick it looked like it could house a family of birds. The third had thoughtful eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the quiet demeanor of someone who spent more time listening than talking. This is Sadie, Colt said. Yesterday was her birthday. Her stepmother threw all her presents in the garbage. Now she is trying to dig them out. The four bikers exchanged glances. A silent communication passed between them, the kind of understanding that comes from years of riding together, fighting together, having each other's backs through hell, and worse. That is messed up, the bald one said quietly. His voice was rough, scarred by something that might have been smoke inhalation, or might have been too many years of yelling orders over gunfire. Colt looked back at Sadie. Let me help you get your stuff out of there, okay? You should not have to climb around in garbage on your birthday or any day. Sadie's eyes widened. Really? Colt turned to his friends. Buckley, grabbed some of those contractor bags from my bike. We will get this sorted out. Within minutes, the four bikers had transformed a nightmare into something almost manageable. They worked efficiently, respectfully, carefully extracting Sadie's birthday presents from the garbage while treating each item like it mattered. Because to her it did. Everything mattered. The sketchbook was damaged. Coffee grounds had stained several pages and the cover was bent and waterlogged. But the pages inside the thick paper meant for real art. Most of those were still usable. The music box was cracked beyond repair. The mechanism that made the bird spin had shattered on impact. No gentle melody would ever play from it again. The books were soggy and stained, pages stuck together, covers warped from moisture. They might dry out eventually, but they would never be the same. The stuffed rabbit was the worst. Its soft gray fur was matted with something sticky and foul. Coffee grounds clung to its button eyes. It smelled like garbage and defeat. Colt laid everything out on a clean blanket he had spread on the ground. Sadie knelt beside her ruined presence, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. "I am sorry, Sadie." Colt's voice was gentle, heavy with genuine regret. "I wish we had gotten here yesterday. We could have stopped this from happening. It is not your fault." Sadie touched the broken music box with one finger, tracing the crack that ran through its painted lid. "She said I did not deserve them. She said I was ungrateful and spoiled and that my daddy wasted money on me." The muscle in Colt's jaw ticked. The other three bikers shifted their weight, their hands clenching into fists at their sides. The red-bearded one, Buckley, crouched down beside Sadie. His size should have been intimidating. He was built like a grizzly bear and looked like he could crush rocks with his bare hands. But his voice when he spoke was soft and careful. "Listen to me, little one. What your stepmother did was cruel. It was wrong. And it has nothing to do with you deserving things or being grateful. That is about her, not you." "But she said." "She was wrong." The tall, bald one, Flint, interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "Adults can be wrong, Sadie, and sometimes adults do terrible things that hurt kids. That does not mean those kids did anything to deserve it." The one with glasses, Shepard, pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of the damaged presents. Date stamped, documented. Evidence, though Sadie did not understand that yet. Colt studied her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes, a memory, perhaps a pain that had never fully healed. "Sadie, where is your dad right now?" "At work. He works long shifts at the mine. Sometimes he does not come home until really late." "And your stepmother hair appointment? She goes every week. She will be back in a couple hours, maybe longer." Sadie's eyes darted toward her house, fear flickering across her face. "If she knows I told someone, she will be really mad. She said she would tell my daddy I was lying, and he would believe her because we's outranked daughters." Colt looked at his brothers. Something unspoken passed between them. A decision made through years of riding together, having each other's backs through everything life had thrown their way. "Sadie," Colt said, carefully choosing his words, like a man walking through a minefield. "What your stepmother did is called emotional abuse. It is not okay. Your dad needs to know what is happening when he is not home. But she is trying to scare you into silence. That is what people do when they know they are doing something wrong." His voice was steady and certain, full of a conviction that Sadie desperately wanted to believe. "We are not going to let her keep treating you like this. You cannot tell. She will make everything worse." Sadie's panic rose, her small hands trembling. "She said she would send me away. To a special school. I would never see my daddy again." Colt held up both hands in a calming gesture. Hey, nobody is doing anything without talking to you first." "Okay, we just met. You do not know if you can trust us yet. That is fair." He lowered his hands and met her eyes directly. "But I want you to know something, Sadie. Me and my brothers." He gestured to the other bikers. "We might look scary to some folks. We ride motorcycles and wear leather and have tattoos. People cross the street when they see us coming. They pull their kids close like we are going to snatch them away." He paused. "But you know what? We believe in protecting people who cannot protect themselves, especially kids. That is a code we live by, not just words, actions." Sadie studied his face, searching for deception, but finding only sincerity. She had become good at reading adults over the past 2 years, good at spotting the difference between what they said and what they meant. Vivian had taught her that, though not in the way Vivian intended, this man was telling the truth. She could feel it in her bones. "Your stepmother judged us based on how we look, I bet," Flint added. "Probably thinks we are dangerous criminals just because of our patches." Sadie nodded slowly. "She calls you thugs and drug dealers. She said the neighborhood is going downhill because people like you are moving in." Flynn exchanged a glance with Colt. "But she is the one who hurt a child," Shepard said quietly, his thoughtful eyes holding Sadie's gaze. "So who is really dangerous?" The question hung in the warm Arizona air. Simple, profound, unanswerable in any way that favored Vivian. Colt stood up his knees, cracking slightly with the movement. Here's what I am going to do, Sadie. I am going to put all these damaged gifts in a bag and keep them at our place. Evidence in case your dad needs to see what happened. He exchanged another look with his brothers. And then we are going to see about getting you some new birthday presents. Real ones. Ones that nobody can throw away. You do not have to do that. Sadie's protest was weak, half-hearted. Part of her could not believe this was happening. Part of her was waiting for the catch, the twist, the moment when these seemingly kind strangers would reveal their true intentions. I know we do not have to. We want to. Colt smiled, and it transformed his tough, weathered face into something almost gentle. Because it is the right thing to do. And because somebody needs to show you that good people exist in this world. Even if they do not look like what you have been taught good people should look like. Sadie felt something shift inside her chest. A tiny spark of light in a place that had been dark for so long. Hope, fragile and uncertain, but unmistakably present. Thank you, she whispered. Do not thank us yet, Buckley said with a kind grin that made his red beard bunch up around his cheeks. We have not fixed anything yet, but we will. That is a promise. The sound of a car engine made them all turn. A sleek sedan was pulling into the driveway next door. Vivian's car, back early from her hair appointment. That her? Colt asked quietly. Sadie nodded. Her whole body had gone rigid. The hope that had sparked in her chest was already flickering, threatened by the familiar weight of fear. Go inside, Sadie. Act normal. Colt's voice was calm but urgent. We will handle this our way, okay? Trust us. Sadie wanted to trust them. Despite everything she had been told about bikers and danger and strangers, these men had shown her more genuine kindness in 20 minutes than Vivian had in 2 years. They had not judged her or dismissed her or told her she was making things up. They had believed her. Simply and completely believed her. Yes, she whispered. Okay. She hurried toward her back door, glancing back once to see the 4 bikers standing by the fence. They were watching her, making sure she got inside safely. Guarding her retreat, protecting her the way no one had protected her since her mother died. Vivian's car door slammed. Heels clicked on the driveway. Sadie slipped through the back door and pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering in her chest. Through the window, she could see Vivian approaching the house, her freshly styled hair gleaming in the sunlight, her face set in an expression of casual superiority. The stepmother's gaze swept across to the neighboring property, taking in the motorcycles and the leather-clad men and the patches that marked them as hellsangels. Her lip curled with visible contempt. She muttered something under her breath that Sadie could not hear but could easily imagine. Then Vivian disappeared through the front door, and the temporary safety of her absence evaporated like morning dew. Sadie waited. She heard Vivian moving through the house, heels clicking on hardwood cabinet doors, opening and closing in the kitchen. Normal sounds? Domestic sounds? The soundtrack of a prison disguised as a home. 10 minutes passed. 20. An hour. Then the footsteps started up the stairs. Sadie's bedroom door swung open without warning. Vivian stood in the doorway, her face tight with barely controlled rage. I saw you. Vivian's voice was low and dangerous. Talking to those criminals. Those bikers. What did you tell them? Nothing. The lie came automatically, a survival reflex honed by months of practice. Do not lie to me. I can always tell when you are lying. Vivian crossed the room in 3 quick strides. Her hands shot out, fingers closing around Sadie's upper arm with crushing force. What did you tell him about me? Pain lanced up Sadie's arm. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. Nothing, I swear. They just asked if I was okay because I was in the yard and in the yard doing what. Sadie's mind raced. She could not mention the garbage bin. Could not let Vivian know she had tried to retrieve the presents. Just walking, getting some air. They said hi. I said hi back. That is all. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Her grip tightened until Sadie felt sure there would be bruises. Listen to me very carefully. Vivian's face was inches from Sadie's, close enough for the child to see the coldness in her stepmother's blue eyes. Those men are dangerous. They are criminals, drug dealers and murderers, and the worst kind of human garbage. If you talk to them, again, if you so much as look in their direction, I will tell your father that you have been sneaking out at night to meet older men. I will have you examined by a doctor. I will make sure everyone knows what a disturbed, lying little whore you are. Sadie's blood ran cold. She did not fully understand all the implications, but she understood enough. The threat was nuclear. And then I will have you sent away to a facility for troubled girls, the kind of place where they lock the doors at night and the nurses carry needles full of medicine that makes you forget your own name. Is that what you want? Sadie's voice came out as a whimper. I do not want that. Then stay away from those men. Do not talk to them. Do not look at them. Do not even think about them. They are nothing but trouble, and if you get involved with them, you will get exactly what you deserve. Vivian released Sadie's arm with a shove that sent the girl stumbling backward onto her bed. Your father called. He is picking up another shift. He will not be home until tomorrow morning. So it is just you and me tonight. The words hung in the air like a threat. I suggest you stay in your room and think very carefully about loyalty, about who your family really is, about what happens to little girls who do not learn to keep their mouths shut. Vivian turned and walked out, leaving the door open. Her heels clicked down the stairs, each step a reminder of her power and Sadie's helplessness. Sadie looked down at her arm. The skin was already reddening where Vivian's fingers had gripped. By morning there would be bruises, purple and yellow and shaped like accusations that no one would ever see because Vivian was too careful and Sadie was too scared. She curled up on her bed and hugged her mother's old pillow to her chest. The fabric had long since lost Lorelei's scent, but Sadie could still remember it if she tried hard enough. Vanilla and lavender and something uniquely mom that no perfume could ever replicate. I miss you, she whispered to the empty room. I miss you so much. Night fell over Prescott. The stars emerged one by one, scattered across the vast Arizona sky like diamonds on black velvet. The mountains stood sentinel in the darkness, ancient and unchanging, indifferent to the suffering of one small girl, in one small house, on one small street. But next door in the Davidson property, 4 men sat on the porch with beers in serious expressions. We are doing this, Flint asked. We are doing this, Colt confirmed. Nobody messes with a kid like that. Not while I am breathing. Road captain's call, Buckley said. We follow your lead. Colt stared at the Brennan house where a single light burned in an upstairs window. First we watch. We document. We make sure we understand exactly what we are dealing with. Then we act. But we do it smart. We do it right. We do it in a way that protects that little girl instead of making things worse for her. Shepard nodded toward the window where Sadie's silhouette was barely visible against the curtain. That woman has no idea what is coming. Good. Colt's voice was flat. Let us keep it that way until we are ready. Sadie did not know they were watching, did not know that 4 strangers had decided she was worth protecting, did not know that the rumble of motorcycles she had heard that morning was the sound of her life beginning to change. She only knew that she was alone, that her arm hurt, that her birthday presents were garbage, and her mother was dead, and her father worked too much, and her stepmother was a monster. She lay in the darkness staring at the ceiling and tried to remember what hope felt like. Around midnight, a soft sound at her window made her freeze. A gentle tapping. 3 knocks, then a pause, then 2 more. Sadie crept to the window, her heart pounding. The tree that grew beside the house had a thick branch that extended toward her room, close enough to climb if you were brave or desperate or both. Colt Ashford's weathered face appeared in the darkness outside the glass. Sadie's eyes went wide. She glanced toward her bedroom door, half expecting Vivian to burst through at any moment. But the house was silent. Her stepmother had gone to bed hours ago. She opened the window as quietly as she could manage. How did you? She whispered. I was a kid once, too. Climbed plenty of trees in my day. Colt's voice was barely audible. I saw her grab you through the window. Saw you stumble. Are you okay? Sadie hesitated. No one had asked her that question and actually wanted an honest answer in so long that she had almost forgotten how to give one. She hurt me. The words came out in a rush. She grabbed my arm. She said if I talk to you again, she will send me away. To a facility. She said she would tell everyone I was disturbed and lying and... Sadie. Colt's voice cut through her panic, calm and steady. Show me your arm. She pushed up her sleeve. Even in the dim light from the stars, the reddened marks were visible. Tomorrow they would be bruises. Tonight they were evidence. Colt's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the tree branch hard enough to make the wood creak. Listen to me. I need you to do something. Can you take a picture of that with a phone or a camera or anything that shows the date? Sadie thought about it. My daddy's old phone. He gave it to me when he got a new one. It does not have service, but the camera still works. Use it. Take pictures of the bruises right now tonight while they are fresh. Then hide the phone somewhere safe, somewhere she will never find it. Why? Because we are going to need proof. Colt's eyes met hers, serious and certain. Your dad loves you, Sadie. I can see that. But right now, he does not know what is happening when he is gone. He cannot see what he does not know to look for. We have to help him see. And to do that, we need evidence that cannot be denied. Sadie absorbed this. The logic made sense even to her 9-year-old mind. Evidence, proof, things that could not be twisted or dismissed or explained away. Okay, she said, I will do it. Good girl. Colt shifted on the branch, reaching into his jacket. One more thing. He pulled out a small gift bag, the kind you could buy at any dollar store, and handed it through the window. Happy belated birthday, kid. The real one. From me and the boys. Sadie took the bag with trembling hands. Inside was a new sketchbook. This one hardbound with thick quality paper meant for serious artists. There was also a professional set of colored pencils in a metal tin far nicer than the ones her father had bought, and a note in blocky handwriting. Your art matters. Your voice matters. You matter. Never let anyone make you believe otherwise. It was signed simply with a C. Sadie looked up at Colt with tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she mouthed silently. Hide those somewhere safe, Colt said. Somewhere she will not find them. And Sadie, things are going to change. I cannot tell you exactly when or how yet, but I promise you this situation is not going to last. You are not going to be alone in this anymore. Okay, Sadie nodded. Now get some sleep. And tomorrow, if you can come outside around 10. Vivian usually leaves around then, right? For errands or shopping or whatever. Usually. Yes, I will be working on my bike in the driveway. If you want to talk, if you need anything, you know where to find me. Colt began to climb back down the tree, moving with surprising grace for a man his size. He paused halfway and then looked back up at her. I know what it is like, Sadie, to be a kid in a house where no one protects you, where the adults who should keep you safe are the ones hurting you. I know how alone that feels, how hopeless. He held her gaze. When I was about your age, my old man used to knock me around, beat me for any reason or no reason at all. My mom was too scared to stop him. I thought it was normal, thought I deserved it. Took me years and some good people who cared enough to step in before I understood that the abuse was not my fault, that I deserved better. His voice softened. You deserve better, Sadie. What she is doing to you is not normal. It is not okay. And it is not your fault. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness below. Sadie closed the window and stood in the middle of her room holding the gift bag against her chest. New art supplies, a note that said she mattered, a promise that things would change. She found her father's old phone in her bottom drawer and carefully photographed the marks on her arm. Then she hid the phone under a loose floorboard in her closet, a hiding spot she had discovered months ago and never told anyone about. The new sketchbook and colored pencils went into the same hiding place. Buried beneath the old phone behind winter clothes, Vivian never bothered to look through. Evidence. Proof. Secrets that could save her. Sadie lay down on her bed and stared at the window where Colt had appeared. 4 bikers with leather vests and tattoos and patches that made people cross the street. 4 men the world called dangerous. They had seen her. Actually seen her. Not the invisible ghost she had learned to become around Vivian. Not the burden or the problem or the ungrateful child. Just Sadie, a 9-year-old girl who had lost her mother and found herself trapped with a monster. And they had decided she was worth helping. For the first time since her mother died, Sadie closed her eyes and allowed herself to hope. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, did not know how long it would take for things to change, or what she would have to endure before they did. She did not know that Colt was already making phone calls, contacting a social worker he knew from club charity work, consulting a lawyer who specialized in family law, reaching out to everyone who might help build a case against Vivian Holt. She only knew that she was not alone anymore. And for now, in the darkness of her room with the stars shining through her window and the mountains standing guard over the sleeping town, that was enough. The Arizona night wrapped around the house on Copper Basin Road. In one bedroom, a monster slept peacefully, dreaming of the perfect life She was building on the wreckage of a child's happiness. In another bedroom, a little girl slept with hope in her heart for the first time in 2 years, protected by the promise of 4 men. Society feared, but she was learning to trust. And next door, 4 hellsangels sat on their porch and planned how to save her. Because sometimes the real monsters wear designer clothes and perfect smiles, and sometimes the angels ride Harley Davidsons. 2 weeks passed like water through a cracked vessel, slow and steady and impossible to hold on to. Sadie learned to live in the spaces between danger. She learned which floorboards creaked and which ones stayed silent. She learned to read Vivian's moods by the angle of her shoulders and the tightness around her mouth. She learned to become invisible when invisibility meant survival. But she also learned something else, something that felt almost like strength. Every morning around 10 after Vivian left for her errands or appointments, or whatever excuses she manufactured to escape the house, Sadie would slip outside. She would find Colt in his driveway working on one of the motorcycles, or unloading supplies, or simply sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee and watchful eyes. They never talked for long. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Quick exchanges that looked innocent to anyone who might be watching, but carried weight far beyond their duration. Colt told her about documentation, about keeping records of every incident, every bruise, every threat. He explained that people who hurt others counted on silence, counted on fear, counted on the belief that no one would listen or care. You have to be your own witness, Sadie. When no one else is there to see what happens, you have to see it for yourself. Write it down, take pictures when you can. Remember the dates and times and exactly what was said. Sadie did as he instructed. She kept a small notebook hidden with the sketchbook and phone under the loose floorboard in her closet. Every night before bed, she wrote down what had happened that day. The insults, the threats, the moments when Vivian's mask slipped and the monster underneath showed its face. The notebook filled slowly but steadily. Page after page of a child's handwriting, recording horrors that no child should have to experience. Meanwhile, Colt made his phone calls. He contacted Diana Foster at Child Protective Services in Yavapai County, a woman he had worked with during the club's charity events for at-risk youth. He spoke with Marcus Webb, a family law attorney who owed the Hells Angels a favor from years back when they had helped his teenage son get clean after a bad run with drugs. He reached out to everyone in his network who might help build a case that could not be dismissed or ignored. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they were turning. On a Tuesday morning in early July, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway of the Brennan house. Sadie watched from her bedroom window as a woman in her mid-40s emerged carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of sensible shoes that suggested she spent her days walking into difficult situations. Her heart began to race. This was it. The plan Colt had whispered about through her window 3 nights ago. A school counselor doing routine follow-ups with students who had experienced significant loss, completely normal, completely above board, and completely designed to give Sadie a chance to tell her story to someone with the authority to act on it. The doorbell rang. Sadie heard Vivian's heels clicking toward the front door, followed by the creak of hinges and the murmur of voices. She waited. Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened her clothes and ran her fingers through her hair. She had to look normal. Had to seem like a regular kid having a regular conversation with a regular counselor. Had to hide the fear that threatened to choke her every time she thought about what she was going to do. Sadie. Vivian's voice floated up the stairs, sugar-sweet and utterly false. Come down here, please. There is someone who would like to meet you. She descended the stairs, slowly gripping the banister with white-knuckled hands. The living room came into view, and she saw Vivian standing beside the woman from the sedan, her face arranged in an expression of warmth and concern that made Sadie's stomach turn. Sadie, this is Miss Warner from the school district. Vivian's hand came to rest on Sadie's shoulder, a gesture that looked maternal but felt like a warning. She is here to check on how you are doing after everything that happened with your mother. The woman smiled kindly. Hello, Sadie. My name is Jessica Warner. I work with Prescott Unified School District as a counselor. We are doing routine check-ins with all students who have lost a parent in the past few years. Just making sure everyone has the support they need. Sadie nodded, not trusting her voice. Mrs. Brennan? Jessica continued, turning to Vivian. These sessions are conducted privately with the student. If you could give us some space for about 30 minutes, that would be helpful. Something flickered in Vivian's eyes. A flash of suspicion quickly masked behind another practiced smile. Of course, I will be right in the kitchen if you need anything. Can I get you some iced tea, Ms. Warner? Or water? Iced tea would be lovely. Thank you. Vivian disappeared into the kitchen, but Sadie knew with absolute certainty that her stepmother would be listening from just out of sight, straining to hear every word, ready to spin whatever story was necessary to protect herself. Jessica settled into the armchair across from the couch where Sadie sat. She opened her portfolio and clicked her pen with the practiced ease of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Sadie, I want you to know that everything we talk about today is confidential. That means I do not share what you tell me with anyone else, unless I believe you are in danger or someone is hurting you. Do you understand? Sadie nodded again. Her heart was pounding so hard she wondered if Jessica could hear it. I am here because your school wants to make sure you are doing okay after losing your mom. That is a really hard thing to go through. How are you feeling about that? The prepared answer rose to Sadie's lips. The answer Vivian would want her to give. The answer that was safe and simple and would not cause any problems. I am fine. Everything is fine. Vivian takes good care of me. But then she remembered Colt's voice in the darkness outside her window. Tell them the truth. All of it. That is the only way this ends. She remembered the notebook hidden under her floorboard filled with page after page of evidence. She remembered the photographs of bruises on her father's old phone. She remembered the music box that would never play again, and the stuffed rabbit that had been thrown away like garbage. And she remembered her mother. Lorelei, who had always told her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Sadie took a deep breath. I miss her every day. Her voice came out small but steady. Everything is different now. Since she died, everything is different. Different. How Sadie's gaze drifted toward the kitchen, toward where Vivian was almost certainly eavesdropping. She lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. My stepmother. She is mean to me. Only when my daddy is not here. Jessica leaned forward slightly, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharpening with attention. Can you tell me what you mean by mean? The words came tumbling out. 2 years of pain and fear spilling from Sadie's mouth in a whispered flood. She told Jessica about the birthday presents in the garbage, describing each item and how Vivian had thrown them away one by one. She told her about her mother's book that had been destroyed, torn apart, and buried in the trash. She told her about the constant criticism, the insults, the way Vivian made her feel worthless and unwanted and invisible. She told her about the pinches and the shoves, the way Vivian's fingers would dig into her arm hard enough to leave marks, but never in places where Garrett could see. She told her about the threats, the warnings about being sent away, the promises that no one would believe a lying child over a respectable wife. Jessica took careful notes, her face showing nothing but professional concern. Her pen moved steadily across the paper, recording everything in neat handwriting that would become part of an official file. Sadie, have you told your father about any of this? Sadie shook her head, tears beginning to slide down her cheeks. I am scared too. Vivian said he would believe her over me. She said I would just make him sad and angry if I complained. She said wives outrank daughters. Has Vivian ever hit you? Actually struck you with her hand. Not really hit, just pinches and pushes. She does not leave marks where Daddy can see them. She is careful. Jessica's pen paused for just a moment before continuing. Sadie, is there anyone else who knows about what is happening? Any teachers, family members, neighbors? Sadie hesitated. This was the dangerous part. The part that could backfire terribly if Jessica reacted the wrong way. The bikers next door, the Hells Angels. They saw her throw away my birthday presents. Mr. Ashford Colt, he said, what she is doing is wrong. He said I deserve better. Jessica's eyebrows rose slightly, but she simply nodded. Colt Ashford, the Hells Angels member. Yes, ma'am. I know people think they are bad because of how they look, but they have been really nice to me. They saved my presents from the garbage and took pictures, and they got me new birthday presents to replace the ones Vivian destroyed. Where are those new presents now hidden in my closet? I did not want Vivian to find them and throw them away too. Jessica made more notes. Then she set down her pen and looked at Sadie with genuine compassion. Sadie, you have been very brave telling me all this. I know it was not easy. Is Vivian going to be mad at me? What happens next is not up to Vivian, Sadie. It is up to the adults who care about your safety and well-being. Jessica closed her notebook and stood smoothing her skirt. I'm going to talk to some people who can help, but I want you to know something important. None of this is your fault. The way Vivian treats you is not because of anything you did or did not do. It is because of choices she is making, bad choices. Do you understand? Sadie nodded, tears still sliding down her cheeks. Colt said the same thing. Then Colt sounds like a smart man. Jessica gathered her portfolio. I'm going to speak with your stepmother for a few minutes and then I will be leaving. But someone will be in touch with your father very soon, okay? Okay, Jessica stepped into the kitchen where Vivian was making an elaborate show of wiping down counters that were already spotless. Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Brennan. Sadie is a lovely girl. She has her moments. Vivian's voice was modest and self-deprecating. I do my best with her, but it is not easy being a stepmother to a child who is still grieving her mother. She misses Lorelai terribly. Sometimes I think she resents me for trying to fill that void. I am sure you are doing your best. Jessica's tone was professionally neutral. I will be including my assessment in Sadie's file. The district will be in touch if any follow-up is needed. Vivian's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Is there a problem? Not at all, just routine procedures. Have a good day, Mrs. Brennan. Jessica walked to the front door, her sensible shoes clicking against the hardwood. She paused with her hand on the knob and glanced back toward the living room where Sadie still sat on the couch, small and vulnerable and desperately hopeful. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded like either an ending or a beginning. Vivian waited exactly 60 seconds. Sadie heard the footsteps coming, heard the sharp click of heels moving from the kitchen through the living room toward the couch where she sat frozen with fear. She did not have time to run, did not have time to hide, could only brace herself for what was coming. Vivian's hand closed around her arm with crushing force. Her fingers dug into the same spot she had grabbed 2 weeks earlier. The bruises from that incident barely faded. What did you tell her? Vivian's voice was low and venomous. All pretense of sweetness burned away. What did you say? Nothing. I told her nothing. The lie came automatically, but Vivian was not fooled. Do not lie to me. I could hear you whispering. I know you were telling her things about me. What did you say? She shook Sadie's arm hard enough to make the girl's teeth rattle. I said I miss my mom. That is all. I said I miss my mom, and school is hard, and liar. You are a liar just like I always knew you were. A manipulative, ungrateful little liar who is trying to destroy my marriage and my life. Vivian's grip tightened until Sadie cried out in pain. Do you have any idea what you have done? If that woman files a report, if she starts asking questions, if she tells your father any of the lies you told her, everything falls apart. Everything I have built here, everything I have worked for. Her face was inches from Sadie's, close enough for the child to see the rage burning in those cold blue eyes. I warned you. I warned you what would happen if you talked. Now you are going to learn that I keep my promises. She released Sadie with a shove that sent the girl tumbling off the couch and onto the floor. Go to your room. Do not come out until I tell you. Do not eat. Do not drink. Do not do anything except sit there and think about what you have done. Sadie scrambled to her feet and ran. Up the stairs into her bedroom door slamming behind her. She threw herself onto her bed and pressed her face into the pillow, muffling the sobs that tore from her throat. But even through the fear and the pain, she remembered what she had to do. Her arm throbbed where Vivian had grabbed her, fresh bruises forming over barely healed ones. Evidence. She waited until her breathing steadied, until the footsteps downstairs settled into the normal rhythm of Vivian moving through the house. Then she crept to her closet, lifted the loose floorboard, and retrieved her father's old phone. The camera flash lit up the dim closet as she photographed her arm. Purple fingerprints already visible against her pale skin. Dated, documented. Proof that no one could dismiss as a child's imagination. She wrote in her notebook too. Time date exactly what Vivian had said and done. Every word she could remember recorded in her careful handwriting. Then she hid everything away again and curled up on her bed, hugging her mother's old pillow, and waited for whatever would come next. What came next was worse than she had imagined. The police car pulled up to the Davidson house at 4 o'clock that afternoon. 2 officers in tan uniforms emerged and approached the porch where Colt and Flint were sitting with beers that had gone warm in their hands. Sadie watched from her window, her heart sinking. She could see Vivian standing in the front yard of their house, arms crossed, face arranged in an expression of righteous concern. She was talking to a third officer, gesturing toward the bikers next door, with the theatrical distress of a woman who had practiced her performance in the mirror. Colt stood slowly as the officers approached. His body language was calm, unthreatening, the posture of a man who had dealt with police before and knew exactly how to handle himself. Sadie could not hear what was being said, could only watch as the officers questioned Colt and Flint, as Vivian pointed and gestured and played her role to perfection. The concerned neighbor, the protective stepmother, the upstanding citizen worried about dangerous criminals targeting local children. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. At one point, Colt invited the officers inside, and they emerged later with somewhat less hostile expressions on their faces. Security camera footage, Sadie guessed. The cameras that covered every angle of the Davidson property, recording everything that happened in the yard and driveway. Finally, the officers returned to Vivian. Their body language had changed. Less sympathetic now, more skeptical. Whatever Colt had shown them had cast doubt on Vivian's story, but the damage was already done. By nightfall, the neighborhood was buzzing with whispers. Sadie heard fragments through her window as people walked past the house, conversations that stopped abruptly when they noticed they might be overheard. Bikers targeting children. Police called. Something about that poor little girl next door. The rumors spread like wildfire through Copper Basin Road. People who had begun to cautiously accept the Hells Angels' presence were now crossing the street again. Doors that had started to open were slamming shut. The fragile goodwill that Colt and his brothers had built over 2 weeks evaporated in a single afternoon. That night, Colt climbed the tree to Sadie's window for the first time since giving her the birthday presents. "You okay?" His voice was low and urgent. "I told the counselor everything." Sadie's whisper was barely audible. "Just like you said. But then Vivian grabbed me again and the police came in." "I know." Colt's face was grim in the darkness. "She called the cops on us. Said we were grooming you, trying to lure you away from your family. I am sorry, this is my fault. I should not have. This is not your fault." Colt's voice was firm. "None of this is your fault. Vivian is trying to discredit us so that when CPS talks to your dad, he will not believe anything that connects back to us. She is playing defense. That means she is scared. But the neighbors, everyone thinks you are. I do not care what the neighbors think. I care about you being safe." Colt reached through the window and squeezed her shoulder gently. "The counselor filed a report. I know because my contact at CPS confirmed it. They are going to call your dad, probably tomorrow or the next day." Sadie's heart lurched. What if he does not believe them? Then we figure out the next step. But Sadie, you have to be strong. Whatever happens, whatever Vivian says or does, you have to keep telling the truth. Even when it feels like no one is listening. Even when it seems hopeless. The truth is the only weapon we have against someone like her. Colt started to climb back down the tree, then paused. "And Sadie, keep documenting everything. Every bruise, every threat, every incident. If this turns into a fight, we need to be ready." She nodded, though she was not sure he could see the gesture in the darkness. "I will. Good girl. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow might be a hard day." He disappeared into the night, leaving Sadie alone with her fear and her hope and the aching bruises on her arm that told the truth even when no one wanted to hear it. The call came on Thursday. Garrett Brennan was deep in the copper mine when his supervisor found him. The older man's face was serious as he pulled Garrett aside from the drilling operation. "You got a phone call, Brennan. They said it is urgent. Something about your daughter." Garrett's blood went cold. He stripped off his work gloves and half ran to the supervisor's office, his mind racing through nightmare scenarios. Accident, injury, hospital. The same desperate fear he had felt the night Lorelei's doctors called to say she had taken a turn for the worse. "This is Garrett Brennan," he said into the phone, his voice rough with dust and terror. "Mr. Brennan, this is Diana Foster from Child Protective Services in Yavapai County. I am calling regarding your daughter Sadie. CPS, not a hospital, not an accident." But somehow the words made his stomach clench even tighter. "What about Sadie? Is she okay?" "Physically, she appears to be fine. But Mr. Brennan, we received a report of suspected emotional abuse. I need to schedule a meeting with you to discuss the situation and assess the home environment." Emotional abuse. The words did not make sense, would not arrange themselves into any pattern Garrett could understand. From who, abuse from who, the report concerns your wife, Vivian Brennan. I want to stress that this is investigatory at this stage, Mr. Brennan. We simply need to talk with you and observe the family dynamic. Can you meet with me tomorrow afternoon? Garrett's legs went weak. He sat down heavily in his supervisor's chair, the phone pressed to his ear, his whole world tilting on its axis. My wife. You think my wife is abusing my daughter? I think we need to have a conversation, Mr. Brennan. These situations are often more complicated than they appear. Can you come to our office at 2 o'clock tomorrow? He agreed mechanically, wrote down the address with hands that shook, hung up the phone. Then he sat in silence for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Vivian, the woman who cooked dinner every night and kept the house spotless and smiled at him when he came home from his shifts. The woman who had seemed like a miracle after the darkness of Lorelei's death, a light at the end of an endless tunnel of grief. The woman who was apparently being accused of hurting his daughter. His supervisor gave him the rest of the day off without question. Garrett drove home in a daze, his mind churning through memories, looking for signs, looking for evidence of something he had missed. Vivian met him at the door with a carefully crafted expression of worried innocence. You are home early. Is everything okay? CPS called me, at work. Garrett's voice was flat. They said there is a report. About you, about Sadie. Something flickered in Vivian's eyes. Fear quickly masked behind concern. Oh, Garrett. She reached for his hands. I was going to tell you tonight. I did not want to worry you at work, but something happened. Something terrible. She led him into the living room, her movements graceful and deliberate, like a performer taking the stage. That counselor who came to visit Sadie, the one from the school district. I think she put ideas in Sadie's head. You know how children are, how impressionable they can be. And those bikers next door are the ones I have been worried about from the start. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. I called the police yesterday, Garrett. I had to. I saw one of them talking to Sadie through the fence, and it just did not look right. A grown man having secret conversations with a child. What kind of person does that? Garrett's head was spinning. Bikers, CPS, counselors, secret conversations. Where is Sadie in her room? She has been upset since that counselor visited. I think the woman asked her leading questions made her think things that are not true. You know how Sadie has been since her mother died? She has always had an active imagination. Bring her down here. I need to talk to her. Vivian hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Of course. Let me get her. She disappeared up the stairs, and Garrett could hear the murmur of voices overhead. When Vivian returned, she was leading Sadie by the hand, her grip gentle, in a way that somehow looked more like custody than affection. Sadie's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked small and fragile and utterly terrified. Sadie, Garrett's voice cracked. Come here, sweetheart. She came to him and he pulled her into a hug, holding her tight against his chest. She felt so thin. Had she always been this thin? Had he really been so busy, so consumed with work and grief in the business of survival, that he had not noticed his own daughter disappearing in front of his eyes? Baby, I need you to tell me the truth. Garrett pulled back and looked into her green eyes. His wife's eyes. Lorelei's eyes. Did Vivian hurt you? Sadie's gaze flickered to her stepmother, who stood in the doorway with an expression of patient suffering. Garrett saw the look, saw the fear that flashed across his daughter's face, but he did not understand what it meant. Sadie, he tried to make his voice gentle. You can tell me anything. I will always believe you. I will always protect you. She wanted to tell him. He could see it in her face, the words pressing against her lips, desperate to escape. But then Vivian spoke. Sadie, honey, tell your father the truth. Tell him what you told that counselor and why you said those things. Her voice was sweet, encouraging. The perfect stepmother helping a confused child find her way to honesty. 1. Sadie's voice broke. I told her that Vivian was mean to me sometimes. Garrett felt a small knot of tension loosen in his chest. Mean, not abusive, not violent. Just mean the way all stepmothers were sometimes mean to children who resented them for not being their real mothers. Is that all I told her about my birthday presents getting thrown away? Garrett frowned. What do you mean thrown away? Vivian stepped forward, her face a masterpiece of wounded innocence. Garrett, I have to be honest with you. I made a mistake. On Sadie's birthday after you left for work, I got frustrated with her. She was being disrespectful, talking back, refusing to do her chores. I overreacted. I told her that if she could not appreciate her gifts, she did not deserve to have them. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue that appeared from nowhere. I did not actually throw them away. I just put them in my closet planning to give them back after she calmed down. But Sadie must have looked in the garbage and assumed the worst. By the time I realized the misunderstanding, she had already told those bikers next door this whole fabricated story about me. Garrett looked at his daughter. Sadie, is that true? Did Vivian really throw your presents away, or did she just put them in her closet? Sadie's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She was trapped. If she told the truth, it would be her word against Vivian's. And Vivian had an answer for everything, an explanation for everything, a reasonable story that made Sadie look like a confused, grieving child who had misunderstood an unfortunate but innocent situation. One, I thought. Sadie's voice was barely a whisper. I saw them in the garbage. I saw her throw them in. You saw me put a bag near the garbage cans, Vivian corrected gently. I was taking out the recycling at the same time. It was dark and you were upset. It is easy to misremember things when we are emotional. The lie was perfect, smooth and polished and impossible to disprove. Garrett looked between his wife and his daughter. His head ached. His heart ached. He wanted desperately to believe that this was all a misunderstanding, that his family was not falling apart, that he had not failed to protect his child. Sadie, he said slowly, I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Vivian ever actually hurt you physically? Has she hit you or grabbed you or done anything that left marks? Now, this was the moment. Sadie could pull up her sleeve and show him the bruises that were still visible on her arm. She could tell him about every pinch and shove and cruel word. She could blow Vivian's story apart with the evidence written on her own body. But Vivian's eyes were fixed on her, cold and warning and promising consequences that Sadie could not even imagine. She has pinched me. Sadie's voice was tiny. When she gets mad, pinched you. Garrett's tone was skeptical, now colored by Vivian's careful performance. Like how, show me what you mean. Sadie reached out and gave her father's arm a small squeeze. Like that, but harder. Garrett looked at the gesture, looked at Vivian, whose face radiated hurt and bewilderment. Looked back at his daughter. Sadie, that does not sound like abuse. That sounds like a stepmother trying to discipline a difficult child. Vivian has never hit you, has she? No, but. And she has never done anything that really hurt you, right? Just normal frustration when you misbehave. Sadie felt the ground crumbling beneath her feet. Every word her father spoke was another shovel of dirt on the grave of her hope. Daddy, please. She threw my presents in the garbage. She calls me names when you are not here. She says I am worthless and stupid, and that Mama died because she was weak. Garrett flinched at the mention of Lorelai, but Vivian was already there, already spinning. I have never said anything like that, Garrett. I love Lorelai. You know, I met her at the hospital when she was receiving treatment. I would never dishonor her memory by saying such horrible things to her daughter. The words hung in the air, poisoning everything they touched. Garrett looked at Sadie with new eyes, suspicious eyes, the eyes of a man who desperately wanted to believe his life was not falling apart. Sadie. His voice was heavy with disappointment. Are you sure you are not exaggerating? Maybe making things seem worse than they really are because you are still upset about your mother. I am not making it up. The tears were flowing freely now. I am not lying. Daddy, please believe me. I want to believe you. But sweetheart, everything you are describing, Vivian, has a reasonable explanation for all of it. The presence, the discipline, everything. And those bikers next door, the ones you have apparently been talking to behind our backs, they are not good people. They might be putting ideas in your head, making you think things that are not true. They are good people. They help me. They are the only ones who... Sadie. Garrett's voice hardened. I do not want you talking to those men anymore. Do you understand? They are dangerous. They belong to a criminal organization. God knows what they want with a child your age. The words hit Sadie like physical blows. Her father who was supposed to protect her. Her father who had promised to always believe her. Her father was choosing Vivian's lies over her truth. Daddy, please. Go to your room. We will talk more about this tomorrow. I have a meeting with CPS and I need to figure out what to tell them. Sadie looked at her father one last time. Looked at the man she loved, the man she had trusted, the man who was failing her in the moment she needed him most. Then she turned and walked up the stairs, each step heavier than the last, leaving behind the shattered pieces of her faith. That night, Sadie lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling and felt something inside her break. She had told the truth, had done everything Colt said to do, had been brave and honest, and had trusted that the truth would be enough. But the truth was not enough. Vivian was too smart, too prepared, too skilled at manipulation. She had turned every piece of evidence into something that made Sadie look like a confused child. She had made Garrett doubt his own daughter. She had won. Sadie curled into a ball and pressed her face into her pillow and sobbed until her throat was raw. She cried for her mother who would have believed her. She cried for her father who should have believed her but did not. She cried for herself, trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Around midnight, the storm rolled in. Thunder crashed over the Bradshaw Mountains, and lightning split the sky, and rain hammered against Sadie's window like fists demanding entry. She could not sleep, could not stop replaying the conversation with her father over and over in her mind, searching for the moment when she had lost him the word or phrase that had turned belief into doubt. Somewhere in the house she heard voices. Vivian was still awake, talking on her phone in the master bedroom. The walls were thin, and in the quiet between thunderclaps, fragments of conversation drifted through. Sadie crept to her door and pressed her ear against the crack. "No, everything is fine now." Vivian's voice was confident, almost cheerful. "He believed me." Of course he did. Men like Garrett want to believe their wives. It is easier than facing the alternative. A pause while the person on the other end responded. "The CPS meeting tomorrow." "Yes, I am ready for it. I will play the concerned stepmother, worried about a troubled child who is acting out because she cannot accept her new family situation. They will recommend therapy, maybe family counseling, something that makes everyone feel like the problem is being addressed." Another pause. "And if that does not work?" Vivian's voice dropped lower and Sadie had to strain to hear. "There are other options. The child clearly has psychological issues, grief abandonment, possible attachment disorder. I could take her to see Dr. Henshaw, the psychiatrist who owes me a favor. He could prescribe something to help her settle down, make her more manageable." Sadie's blood turned to ice. A few months of that, and no one will take anything she says seriously. She will just be the disturbed girl who needs medication to function. Certainly not a reliable witness to anything. The conversation continued, but Sadie had stopped listening. She stumbled back to her bed, her mind reeling. Vivian was going to drug her, was going to make everyone think she was crazy, was going to erase her voice, completely turning her into a ghost that no one could see or hear or believe. She thought about giving up, about accepting that she had lost, that Vivian had won, that the rest of her childhood would be spent in a medicated haze while her stepmother smiled and played the martyr. But then she remembered something. Colt's voice speaking through her window in the darkness. "The truth is the only weapon we have against someone like her." And Shepard, crouching beside her, ruined birthday presents. "What your stepmother did was cruel. It was wrong. And it has nothing to do with you deserving things or being grateful." And her mother, her beautiful, brave mother, who had fought cancer with everything she had, even when the battle was hopeless, who had told Sadie with her last breath that she was strong and good and loved. Sadie got out of bed. She pulled the notebook from its hiding place under the floorboard. She found a pen, and she began to write. She wrote everything, from the very beginning. The day her mother died, the day Vivian moved in, the first time her stepmother heard her. Every insult, every threat, every bruise, every destroyed possession. She wrote about the birthday presents in the garbage, about the book that had been her mother's, about the music box that would never play again, and the stuffed rabbit that had been thrown away like trash. She wrote about Colt and his brothers, the men who had shown her kindness when everyone else looked away. She wrote about the phone calls she had overheard tonight, about Vivian's plan to drug her into silence. And at the end, she wrote the most important words of all. "If I disappear or get sent away somewhere, please show this letter to my daddy. Please tell him that I was telling the truth. I know he did not believe me today. I know Vivian made him doubt me, but everything in this letter is true. I am not crazy. I am not making things up. I am just a kid who lost her mom and got stuck with a monster. My name is Sadie Brennan. I am 9 years old, and I am telling the truth. She signed it with her full name and the date. Then she folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and sealed it. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. The thunder had moved on, rumbling in the distance over the mountains. The house was quiet. Vivian finally asleep, her plans for tomorrow laid out like weapons waiting to be used. Sadie pulled on her shoes and her jacket. She crept down the stairs, avoiding the creaky boards, moving like a ghost through her own home. The back door opened silently, and she slipped out into the wet darkness. The fence between the two properties was old and weathered with gaps between the boards, just wide enough to fit an envelope through. Sadie found the right spot, the one closest to the Davidson house, and pushed her letter into the darkness on the other side. Then she went back inside, back to her room, back to her bed. She did not know if Colt would find the letter, did not know if it would make any difference, did not know what tomorrow would bring. But she had done something. She had taken action instead of waiting to be saved. She had used her voice even if no one was listening yet. And somehow in the darkness of her room, with the rain still falling outside, that felt like the most important thing she had ever done. Morning came slowly, dragging itself over the mountains like a wounded animal. Colt found the letter when he went outside to check on the motorcycles after the storm. A white envelope, soggy from the rain, wedged between the fence boards. His name written on the front in a child's careful handwriting. He opened it, standing in the driveway, reading Sadie's words, while the Arizona sun climbed higher, and the puddles from last night's storm began to steam in the heat. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking. He read it again and again, each word burning itself into his memory. If I disappear or get sent away somewhere, I am not crazy. I am not making things up. I'm just a kid who lost her mom and got stuck with a monster. Colt walked back to the house and found Flint and Buckley and Shepard in the kitchen drinking coffee and planning the day's work. "We have a problem," he said, laying the letter on the table. They read it in silence, passing the pages between them. When Shepard finished the last page, he looked up at Colt with something hard and determined in his usually gentle eyes. "What do we do?" Colt pulled out his phone and checked the time. Garrett Brennan had a meeting with CPS at 2 o'clock. That gave him a few hours to act. "I am going to the mine," he said. "I am going to talk to that man face to face, father to father, and I am going to show him what his daughter wrote when she thought no one would ever read it. You think he will listen?" Colt looked at the letter, at Sadie's words written in her neat handwriting. "I do not know. But that little girl put everything on the line to write this. She trusted us when her own father would not believe her. I am not going to let her down." He grabbed his jacket and his keys. "If this does not work, if Garrett still will not see the truth, then we go to Plan B." "What is Plan B?" Buckley asked. Colt paused at the door. "I am still figuring that out. But whatever it is, that little girl is not going to spend another night in that house with that woman. One way or another, this ends." He walked out into the morning light, climbed onto his Harley, and kicked the engine to life. The copper mine in Jerome was 45 minutes away. 45 minutes to figure out what to say to a man who had chosen to believe a monster over his own child. But Colt had Sadie's letter in his jacket pocket. Her words, her truth, her desperate cry for help. And he had made a promise, one that he intended to keep. The Harley roared down Copper Basin Road, past the house where a little girl was waking up to face whatever punishment Vivian had devised, past the neighbors who whispered about dangerous bikers and troubled children, past all the people who had looked at Sadie and chosen not to see. Colt Ashford was done waiting, done watching, done letting the system work at its own pace while a child suffered. Today, one way or another, the truth would be heard. The copper mine in Jerome sat carved into the side of Mingus Mountain like a wound in the earth. Colt pulled his Harley into the visitor parking lot and killed the engine, the sudden silence pressing against his ears after 45 minutes of wind and thunder. He had called ahead. A friend of a friend who worked in the administrative office had arranged for Garrett Brennan to meet him during the lunch break. The man had no idea who was coming or why, only that someone needed to speak with him urgently about his daughter. The waiting area was a prefabricated building with plastic chairs and outdated safety posters on the walls. Colt sat with his leather vest, drawing stares from the few office workers who passed through. He did not care. Let them stare. Let them whisper. He had more important things to worry about than the opinions of strangers. At 12:15, the door opened and Garrett Brennan walked in. He looked worse than Colt had expected, older than his years, with dark circles under his eyes and a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. This was a man who had been hollowed out by grief and was only now beginning to realize that the person he had trusted to help him rebuild had been tearing everything down instead. "You wanted to see me." Garrett's voice was flat, suspicious. His eyes took in Colt's leather vest, the Hell's Angels patch, the tattoos visible on his forearms. "Something about you being a neighbor." Colt stood and extended his hand. "Colt Ashford, I live next door to you on Copper Basin Road." Garrett did not take the offered hand. "You are one of those bikers, the ones my wife called the police on." "I am, and I am here because your daughter needs you to know the truth." "The truth?" Garrett's jaw tightened. "My daughter has been telling stories, exaggerating things, making accusations that do not hold up when you look at them closely. Number, she has been telling the truth, and you have been too blind to see it." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and unforgiving. Garrett's face flushed with anger. "You do not know anything about my family. You do not know anything about my daughter or my wife or what goes on in my house." Colt reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. He set it on the table between them. "I know that on the night of your daughter's 9th birthday, your wife threw every present you bought her into the garbage. I know because I was there the next morning when Sadie was trying to dig them out, crying so hard she could barely breathe. I have photographs of those presents, time-stamped and documented. The sketchbook with coffee grounds staining the pages. The music box with its mechanism shattered. The books warped from garbage water. The stuffed rabbit covered in filth." Garrett stared at the envelope but did not touch it. "I know that your wife has been pinching and grabbing your daughter hard enough to leave bruises. I have photographs of those too, taken by Sadie herself on the phone you gave her. Dated, documented, evidence that your 9-year-old daughter collected because she knew no one would believe her word alone." "That is not possible." Garrett's voice wavered. "Vivian would never." Colt pulled out Sadie's letter. The pages were still slightly warped from the rain, but the words were legible. Every painful, desperate word. "Your daughter wrote this last night. She pushed it through the fence between our properties because she had no one else to turn to. Because her own father looked her in the eyes and chose to believe a manipulator over his own flesh and blood." He held the letter out to Garrett. "Read it, all of it, and then tell me your daughter is making things up." Garrett took the letter with hands that trembled slightly. He sat down in one of the plastic chairs and began to read. Colt watched his face, watched the color drain from his cheeks as he absorbed his daughter's words, watched his eyes grow wet as the truth he had been avoiding finally broke through his defenses. "If I disappear or get sent away somewhere, please show this letter to my daddy. I am not crazy. I am not making things up. I am just a kid who lost her mom and got stuck with a monster." When Garrett finished reading, he sat motionless for a long moment. The letter trembled in his grip. Then a sound escaped him, something between a sob and a groan, the sound of a man whose heart was breaking. "She thought." His voice cracked. "She thought no one would ever read this. She thought she might disappear, and this would be the only record of what happened to her. She was scared." Colt's voice was gentler now. "She was scared and alone, and the one person who should have protected her chose to believe her abuser instead." "I did not know." Garrett's face crumpled. "I swear to God I did not know. Vivian had an explanation for everything. She made it all sound so reasonable. And Sadie, she seemed so upset, so emotional. I thought maybe the grief was making her see things that were not there. That is what abusers do. They make you doubt the victim. They make the victim doubt themselves. They are very good at it, Mr. Brennan. Your wife is very good at it." Garrett looked up at Colt with devastated eyes. "What do I do? How do I fix this?" Colt sat down across from him. "First, you go to that CPS meeting this afternoon. You tell them everything. Show them the photographs, the letter, all of it. You stop protecting your wife and start protecting your daughter. But it is her word against Vivian's. And Vivian is so convincing. Then we get proof she cannot talk her way out of." "What kind of proof?" Colt leaned forward. "Hidden cameras. In the living room, the kitchen, anywhere, Vivian interacts with Sadie when you are not home. We set them up, we record for a few days, and we see what she does when she thinks no one is watching." Garrett's expression shifted, uncertainty warring with desperate hope. "That feels like a betrayal. Spying on my own wife. Your wife has been betraying your daughter for 18 months. She has been hurting a child who already lost her mother, making her feel worthless and unloved and invisible. Whatever loyalty you think you owe Vivian, you owe your daughter more. The words landed like hammer blows. Garrett flinched but did not look away. If I am wrong, Colt continued, if the cameras show nothing, if Vivian really is the victim of a disturbed child's imagination, then I will apologize publicly. I will pack up and leave Copper Basin Road. I will never bother your family again. And if you are right, if I am right, then you will have proof that cannot be denied. Proof that will protect your daughter in court. Proof that will make sure Vivian never hurts Sadie again. Garrett looked down at the letter still clutched in his hands, his daughter's words written in the desperate hope that someday someone would believe her. Okay. His voice was barely a whisper. Okay, set up the cameras. The installation happened that night while Vivian was at her weekly book club meeting. Colt and Flint worked quickly and efficiently, placing small wireless cameras in locations that covered the main living areas without being visible to casual observation. Garrett watched them work with the hollow expression of a man who was hoping to prove himself wrong, but knowing in his heart that he would not. These feed to a secure server, Colt explained, showing Garrett the app on his phone. You can access the footage anytime from anywhere. Everything is time-stamped and encrypted. No one can claim it was tampered with. How long do we wait? As long as it takes, could be days, could be hours. Depends on when Vivian drops her mask. They finished just before Vivian's car pulled into the driveway. Colt and Flint slipped out the back door and disappeared into their own house, leaving Garrett to face his wife with the knowledge of what was now watching and recording every moment. The cameras captured everything. Day one showed nothing unusual. Vivian was sweet to Sadie when Garrett was home, cool and distant when he left for work. Standard stepmother behavior, nothing that would stand up in court. Day two was more the same. Vivian ignored Sadie mostly, which was unpleasant but not illegal. The child retreated to her room and stayed there, emerging only for meals that she ate in silence while her stepmother scrolled through her phone. Day three, Garrett worked a double shift, 16 hours away from home. 16 hours for Vivian to do whatever she wanted without fear of discovery. Colt was the one who reviewed the footage. He sat in the living room of the Davidson house with Flint and Buckley and Shepard watching the screen of his laptop while the Arizona night pressed against the windows. He found it at the 4-hour mark. Sadie had come downstairs for a glass of water, a simple thing, an innocent thing. She was trying to be quiet, trying to be invisible, but Vivian heard her anyway. The stepmother appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face twisted with irritation. The cameras captured every word in perfect clarity. What are you doing down here? I told you to stay in your room. I was thirsty. I just wanted some water. You wanted attention. You always want attention. Poor little orphan Sadie, always needing someone to notice her, always demanding that the world revolve around her. I just wanted water. Sadie's voice was small. Please. Vivian crossed the kitchen in 3 quick strides. Her hand shot out and grabbed Sadie's arm, yanking the child away from the sink. You are pathetic. Do you know that pathetic and weak just like your mother was? She could not even fight off a disease. Just lay there and died and left the rest of us to deal with her mess. Do not talk about my mama. Sadie's voice cracked with grief and anger. Do not you dare. Or what Vivian's laugh was cruel. You will tell your daddy. He does not believe you. No one believes you. You are just a disturbed little girl with a dead mother and a head full of lies. She shoved Sadie backward. The child stumbled, catching herself on the counter. I saw your little hiding spot, by the way. Vivian's voice dripped with satisfaction. Found it yesterday when I was cleaning your room. That notebook where you write down all your little complaints. That sketchbook some stranger gave you. She reached behind her and produced the hardbound sketchbook that Colt had given Sadie. The birthday present that had been hidden so carefully, discovered and seized like contraband. Number. Sadie's face went white. Please, that is mine. Please do not. Yours. Nothing in this house is yours. Everything you have, your father paid for, and your father belongs to me now. Vivian opened the sketchbook and looked at the drawings inside. Mountains and deer and a woman's face rendered in colored pencil with obvious love. She drew your mother. Vivian's lip curled. How sweet. How pathetic. And then while Sadie watched in horror, Vivian began to tear the pages out one by one. She ripped them slowly, deliberately, making sure the child saw every piece of her artwork being destroyed. Stop! Sadie lunged forward, trying to grab the sketchbook. Stop it, please! Vivian's hand connected with Sadie's face. A slap, open-palmed and vicious, hard enough to snap the child's head to the side. Do not ever touch me. Vivian's voice was pure venom. Do not ever raise your hand to me. You are nothing. You hear me, nothing. Your mother was nothing. And you will end up just like her, dead and forgotten and unmourned. Sadie stood frozen, her hand pressed to her reddening cheek, tears streaming down her face. The ruined pages of her sketchbook scattered across the kitchen floor like fallen leaves. Get out of my sight. Vivian threw the destroyed sketchbook at Sadie's feet. And if you tell anyone about this, I will make sure your father sends you away. Somewhere with locked doors and nurses who give you shots that make you forget your own name. Is that what you want? No. Then be a good girl and keep your mouth shut. Sadie gathered the remnants of her sketchbook and fled. The camera captured her sobbing as she ran up the stairs, captured the way she clutched the torn pages to her chest, captured the desperate grief of a child whose last connection to kindness had just been destroyed. Colt stopped the footage. The room was silent. Flint spoke first. His voice was rough with barely contained rage. Tell me we can use this. We can use this. Colt's hands were clenched into fists. This is assault, destruction of property, emotional abuse caught on camera. No judge in the world will watch this and rule in that woman's favor. When do we show Garrett now? Tonight. I am not letting that child spend another night in that house with that monster. Garrett Brennan arrived at the Davidson house 20 minutes later. His face was gray with exhaustion from the double shift, but his eyes were alert and wary. You found something. It was not a question. He could see it in their faces. Colt gestured to the laptop on the coffee table. Sit down. Garrett sat. Colt pressed play. The footage ran for 8 minutes. 8 minutes that changed everything. 8 minutes that stripped away every lie Vivian had told, every manipulation she had employed, every mask she had worn. When it ended, Garrett sat motionless. His face was wet with tears he had not noticed shedding. His hands gripped his knees so hard the knuckles had gone white. She hit my daughter. His voice was hollow. She hit her. She tore up her drawings. She said Lorelei deserved to die. Colt said nothing. There was nothing to say. The truth was there on the screen, undeniable and damning. Garrett stood abruptly. His whole body was shaking. I have to go home. What are you going to do? Garrett looked at Colt with eyes that had finally opened to the horror he had been blind to for 18 months. I am going to protect my daughter, the way I should have from the beginning. He walked out into the night. Colt and his brothers watched through the window as he crossed the yard and disappeared into his own house. They did not follow. This was something Garrett had to do himself, something he had to face without backup or support. A reckoning that was 18 months overdue. The sounds carried through the thin walls, voices raised in argument, Vivian's shrill denials, Garrett's low, implacable demands, Sadie's name repeated over and over like a prayer or an accusation. Then the front door of the Brennan house slammed open. Vivian emerged, her face contorted with fury, dragging a suitcase behind her. This is not over. Her voice carried across the yard loud enough for the neighbors to hear. You will regret this, Garrett. Both of you. I will take everything. The house, the savings, everything. Garrett stood in the doorway, blocking her from going back inside. Take whatever you want. Just stay away from my daughter. You think anyone will believe that footage? You think a court will side with a grieving man and his disturbed child over me? I will destroy you. I will destroy her. The door closed. Vivian stood alone in the driveway. Her perfect facade finally cracked the monster underneath, visible for anyone who cared to look. She loaded her suitcase into her car. She cast one venomous glance toward the Davidson house, where 4 bikers stood on the porch watching her departure. Then she drove away into the Arizona night, leaving behind a house that was no longer her domain and a family she had never truly been part of. Inside the Brennan house, Garrett found Sadie huddled in her bedroom, the torn pages of her sketchbook clutched to her chest. She flinched when he opened the door, an automatic response to any adult presence, and the sight of it broke something in his heart. Sadie, his voice cracked. Baby girl, I am so sorry. She looked up at him with eyes that held no trust, no hope, only the wary exhaustion of a child who had learned that adults could not be relied upon. Is she gone? She is gone, and she is never coming back. He crossed the room and knelt beside her bed, putting himself at her eye level. I saw what she did to you. The camera footage, the slap, the sketchbook, everything. He had to stop and breathe through the guilt that threatened to choke him. I should have believed you. From the very beginning, I should have believed you. You are my daughter, my flesh and blood, and I chose a stranger over you. Sadie's lip trembled. You said wives outrank daughters. I was wrong. Garrett's voice was fierce. I was so wrong, Sadie. Nothing outranks you. Nothing. You're the most important person in my life, and I failed you. I failed you when your mother died, and I retreated into work. I failed you when I brought Vivian into this house without really knowing who she was. I failed you when I looked at the evidence right in front of my face and chose to believe her lies instead of your truth. He reached out and gently took her hand. I cannot undo what happened. I cannot take back the months of pain you suffered while I was too blind to see. But I can promise you that it is over now. No one is ever going to hurt you in this house again. And if you can find it in your heart to give me another chance, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Sadie looked at her father, at the tears on his cheeks, at the devastation in his eyes, at the man she had loved and trusted and lost and found again. She threw herself into his arms. They held each other for a long time, father and daughter, grieving and healing and beginning the slow process of rebuilding what had been broken. Outside the window, the Arizona stars emerged one by one, ancient witnesses to the small miracle happening in a modest house on Copper Basin Road. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Vivian had hired an expensive attorney and come out swinging. She denied everything. She accused Garrett of doctoring the footage. She claimed the Hells Angels had manipulated a vulnerable child. She painted herself as the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by criminals and a disturbed girl who had never accepted her. The judge listened to all of it. Then he reviewed the evidence. The camera footage time-stamped and verified by independent experts. The photographs of Sadie's bruises corroborated by medical records from her pediatrician. The CPS investigation file, which documented a pattern of emotional abuse consistent with Sadie's accounts. Sadie's notebook, page after page of incidents recorded in a child's handwriting with dates and details. And finally, Colt Ashford himself taking the stand as both witness and legal advisor. His law degree from Arizona State University surprised everyone in the courtroom except those who knew him. He testified calmly and professionally, describing what he had witnessed on the day he moved in the damaged birthday presents, the crying child, the threats Vivian had made. The defense attorney tried to discredit him based on his Hells Angels membership. Colt remained unruffled. I have been a member of the Hells Angels for 20 years. I have also built homes for low-income families, helped veterans transition back to civilian life, and advocated for abused children in courtrooms across Arizona. You can judge me by my patches if you want, or you can judge me by my actions. The judge, it turned out, preferred to judge by actions. When the evidence phase concluded, the judge asked if there was anyone else who wished to speak before he rendered his decision. Sadie raised her hand. The courtroom went quiet. Garrett started to object to protect his daughter from the spotlight, but she shook her head. I want to say something. The judge nodded. Go ahead, young lady. Sadie stood. She was small for her age, still wearing the faded pink dress that had been her mother's last birthday gift. Her hands trembled, but her voice was clear. Everyone told me to stay away from the men next door. They said Hell's Angels were dangerous, criminals, the kind of people you cross the street to avoid. She looked at Colt, at Flint and Buckley and Shepard sitting in the gallery. But when I was crying beside a garbage can because my birthday presents had been thrown away, they were the only ones who stopped to ask if I was okay. When no one believed me, they believed me. When I had nowhere else to turn, they were there. Her gaze moved to Vivian, who sat rigid at the defense table, her face a mask of controlled fury. My stepmother wore nice clothes and had perfect hair and said all the right things in front of my daddy. Everyone thought she was a good person because she looked like what good people are supposed to look like. Sadie's voice grew stronger. But she hurt me. She called me names and grabbed me and threw away the things I loved. She told me my mother deserved to die. She made me feel like I was worthless and invisible and better off not existing. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she did not stop. I learned something important these past few months. Sometimes the people everyone is afraid of are the ones who show up when you need help. And sometimes the people everyone trusts are the ones who hurt you when no one is watching. She turned to face the judge directly. I am 9 years old. I lost my mama to cancer, and I almost lost my daddy to lies. But I found out that there are good people in this world even if they do not look like what you expect. And I found out that the truth matters even when it is hard to tell and even harder to believe. She sat down. The courtroom remained silent. The judge cleared his throat. He looked at Vivian, at Garrett, at the four bikers in the gallery, at the small girl who had just delivered the most powerful testimony of the entire trial. I have reviewed all the evidence presented in this case. The video footage is clear and unambiguous. The pattern of abuse is well documented. And the testimony I have heard today, both professional and personal, leaves no doubt in my mind about what occurred in the Brennan household. He turned to Vivian. Mrs. Brennan, the evidence shows a sustained campaign of emotional and physical abuse against a minor child. Your denials are not credible. Your attempts to paint yourself as a victim are contradicted by your own actions captured on camera. Vivian's attorney started to speak, but the judge silenced him with a look. I am granting Mr. Brennan's petition for divorce. I am awarding him full custody of the minor child, and I am issuing a restraining order prohibiting Mrs. Brennan from any contact with Sadie Brennan, direct or indirect, for a period of 5 years. He gathered his papers. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the room. It was over. After 18 months of suffering and 6 weeks of legal battle, it was finally over. Garrett pulled Sadie into a fierce hug. Around them, people began to move and murmur the normal sounds of a courtroom returning to life after a moment of suspended time. Colt approached them, Flint and Buckley, and Shepard at his back. You did good, kid. His voice was gruff with emotion. Took guts to stand up there and say all that. Sadie looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much for 9 years, but were finally beginning to hold something like peace. Thank you for believing me, for everything. Colt crouched down to her level. The patches on his vest caught the courtroom lights. The tattoos on his arms told stories of a life lived hard and without apology. But his eyes, when they met hers, held nothing but gentleness. You believed yourself first. That is what mattered. All we did was show up. He stood and extended his hand to Garrett. The two men shook and something passed between them. Understanding, respect. The beginning of a friendship forged in crisis and tempered by shared purpose. Vivian was escorted from the courtroom by her attorney. She did not look at Sadie or Garrett as she passed. Her face was set in hard lines, already calculating her next move, already planning how to salvage something from the wreckage of her schemes. But she was gone. That was what mattered. Gone from their lives, gone from their home, gone from any position where she could hurt Sadie again. Outside the courthouse, the Arizona sun blazed down from a cloudless sky. Garrett lifted his face to the warmth and felt something loosen in his chest. A knot that had been there so long he had forgotten it existed. What now? Daddy, Sadie asked. Now we go home. He looked down at his daughter, seeing her clearly for the first time in years, and we start over. Together. 3 months later, on a warm September afternoon, Sadie Brennan sat in her front yard with an easel and the professional art supplies that had replaced the ones Vivian destroyed. She was sketching the mountains, trying to capture the way the afternoon light painted the Bradshaw Range in shades of gold and purple. Her technique had improved over the summer, guided by online tutorials in the natural talent that had always been there waiting for a chance to emerge. The rumble of her father's truck coming up the driveway made her smile. It was only 4 o'clock. He had been coming home earlier and earlier these days, cutting back on overtime, prioritizing time with his daughter over extra money they did not desperately need. Hey, artist. Garrett climbed out of the truck, copper dust still clinging to his work clothes, but a genuine smile on his weathered face. How is the masterpiece coming? Pretty good. I think I finally figured out how to do the shadows on the rocks. He came to stand beside her, studying the work in progress. She could feel his presence, solid and reassuring, the father she remembered from before her mother got sick. That is beautiful, Sadie. Your mother would be proud. The mention of Lorelei no longer brought only pain. Now it was mixed with warmth, with love, with the bittersweet comfort of memories that could finally be cherished instead of mourned. The sound of motorcycle engines made them both turn. 4 Harleys were coming down Copper Basin Road, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. Looks like we have company. Garrett's tone was warm, a far cry from the suspicion and fear he had once felt at the sight of leather vests and Hell's Angels patches. The bikes pulled into the Davidson driveway next door. Colt and Flint and Buckley and Shepard dismounted with the easy grace of men who had spent their lives on two wheels. "Hey, Brennans," Colt called across the fence. "We are firing up the grill. Burgers and Daws, you in?" Sadie looked up at her father with hopeful eyes. "Can we?" Garrett pretended to consider. "I do not know. I heard those bikers were dangerous criminals." "Daddy," he laughed and ruffled her hair. "Go on. I will be over in a minute after I wash off some of this mine dust." Sadie carefully set aside her art supplies and ran across the yard to the gap in the fence that had become their unofficial passage between properties. On the other side, Buckley was already wrestling with a bag of charcoal, while Shepard arranged lawn chairs in a semicircle. "Hey, little one." Flint greeted her with the nickname that had stuck since that first terrible morning. Ready to learn how to make the perfect burger. Over the following hours, the backyard of the Davidson house filled with the sounds of summer. Meat sizzling on the grill, laughter rising into the evening air, the clink of bottles and the murmur of conversation between people who had become something like family. Garrett emerged from his house freshly showered, wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of his work clothes. He accepted a beer from Colt and settled into a lawn chair with the relaxed posture of a man who had finally found peace. Sadie learned the secret to Buckley's burger seasoning, a closely guarded recipe that involved more garlic than seemed reasonable. She watched Flint demonstrate basic motorcycle maintenance on one of the Harleys, filing away the knowledge for some future day when she might need it. She challenged Shepard to a cornhole tournament and lost spectacularly, but laughed so hard her stomach hurt. These afternoons had become a regular occurrence over the past 3 months. Barbecues and movie nights, in lazy Sundays where the boundary between the two properties seemed to disappear entirely. The bikers had become fixtures in Sadie's life, honorary uncles who taught her things and told her stories and treated her like she mattered. The neighborhood had noticed the change. At first, the whispers had continued. Those dangerous men, that poor disturbed child. But gradually, as the weeks passed and nothing terrible happened, curiosity had begun to replace fear. Mrs. Patterson from down the street had brought over a casserole one evening, ostensibly to welcome the new neighbors belatedly, but really to satisfy her curiosity about the leather-clad men who had somehow become part of the Brennan family. She had left 3 hours later, having learned that Flint made excellent cornbread, and Shepard could discuss Jane Austen with surprising depth. Young Kevin Mitchell from 2 houses over had asked if he could see the motorcycles up close. His mother had been horrified until Colt patiently explained every safety feature and then showed Kevin how to properly mount and dismount without risking injury. Now Kevin came by every weekend dreaming of the day he would be old enough for his own bike. Slowly, carefully, the Hells Angels of Copper Basin Road were becoming part of the community, not because they had changed who they were, but because the community was learning to see past patches and tattoos to the men underneath. As the sun began to set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, Colt found Sadie sitting alone by the fence, her plate of burger and chips forgotten beside her. "Mind if I sit?" She shook her head, making room for him on the grass. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the colors deepen over the Bradshaw Range. "You doing okay, kid?" Colt asked finally. "Yeah." Sadie pulled at a blade of grass, considering. "Better than okay, actually, for the first time in a long time." "I am glad." Another silence, but this one was different, full of things that needed to be said. "Colt." Sadie's voice was small but steady. "Why did you help me? That first day, I mean. You did not know me. You did not owe me anything. Why did you stop?" Colt was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "I told you once that my old man used to knock me around when I was a kid, that my mom was too scared to stop him." Sadie nodded. She remembered. "What I did not tell you was that there was a neighbor, old guy named Earl, who lived 2 houses down. He saw what was happening, saw me come to school with bruises, saw me flinch every time an adult raised their voice." Colt picked up his own blade of grass, twisting it between his scarred fingers. Most people looked the other way, told themselves it was not their business, told themselves that what happened behind closed doors was not their concern. His jaw tightened, but Earl did not look away. He called the authorities. He testified in court. He gave me a place to stay when my father finally went to jail and my mother fell apart. He turned to face Sadie. I was 11 years old when Earl saved my life. He was just a retired electrician with a bad hip and a fondness for crossword puzzles. Nothing special about him, nothing heroic. He just saw a kid who was hurting and decided to do something about it. The sunset colors deepened, painting their faces in warm light. That first morning when I saw you by that garbage can, crying over birthday presents that someone had thrown away to hurt you, I saw myself. I saw that 11-year-old boy who thought nobody would ever help him. And I knew I could not look away, could not tell myself it was not my business. He met her eyes. I helped you because someone helped me, because that is how it works. Someone shows up for you and then you show up for someone else. One kid at a time, one act of decency at a time. That is how the world gets better. Sadie absorbed this. The story of a boy who had been saved and had grown up to save others. The chain of kindness that stretched back through years and would continue forward through the choices she herself would make. I want to do that someday, she said quietly. Show up for someone who needs help, the way you showed up for me. You already did. You stood up in that courtroom and told the truth. You wrote that letter when you thought no one would ever read it. You kept fighting even when it seemed hopeless. He put a hand on her shoulder. That takes courage, Sadie. Real courage. And someday when you see someone who needs help, you will have what it takes to give it. She leaned against him, this rough-edged man who had become something like a second father to her. He put an arm around her shoulders and held her gently. From across the yard, Garrett watched them, his daughter and the biker who had saved her. Two people who should have had nothing in common, but who had forged a bond stronger than blood. He thought about judgment, about how easy it was to look at someone and think you knew everything about them based on how they dressed or what groups they belonged to, about how wrong those assumptions could be. He thought about Vivian with her perfect hair and her polished smile and her heart full of cruelty, about how everyone had trusted her because she looked trustworthy, about how much damage that misplaced trust had caused. And he thought about Colt and his brothers, about leather vests and tattoos and motorcycles that made neighbors cross the street, about four men who had seen a child in crisis and had chosen to help without expecting anything in return. Sometimes the people everyone fears are the ones who show up when you need them. And sometimes the people everyone trusts are the ones who hurt you when no one is watching. Sadie had spoken those words in a courtroom, but Garrett knew he would carry them with him for the rest of his life. Hey, Colt's voice interrupted his thoughts. You going to stand there staring all night, or you going to come eat this burger before it gets cold? Garrett smiled and walked over to join his daughter and their unlikely family. The evening stretched on soft and golden. Stories were told. Laughter rang out. A little girl who had lost everything sat surrounded by people who cared about her in a yard full of warmth and light and the simple joy of belonging. Later, much later, after the food was gone and the stars had emerged and the other bikers had said their goodnights, Sadie and Garrett walked back to their house together. Daddy. Sadie's hand found his in the darkness. I am glad we moved to Copper Basin Road. Garrett squeezed her fingers gently. Me too, baby girl. Me too. They reached their front door. Before going inside, Sadie paused and looked back at the Davidson house where Colt sat alone on the porch, a silhouette against the light from the windows. She raised her hand in a wave. He raised his back. Then she went inside to her room, to her bed, to dreams that were no longer haunted by fear and cruelty. In the morning, she would wake to the smell of pancakes cooking because her father had started making breakfast on Saturdays, a new tradition to replace the ones that had been lost. She would work on her art and maybe help Flint wash the motorcycles and definitely beat Shepard at cornhole this time. She would live the ordinary, extraordinary life of a child who was seen and valued and loved. Outside, the Arizona night wrapped around the two houses on Copper Basin Road. In one of them, a father finally at peace looked in on his sleeping daughter and felt his heart swell with gratitude for second chances. In the other, four men who society feared sat talking quietly about a child they had saved and the difference that one act of showing up could make. The mountains stood eternal against the star-scattered sky. The world kept turning. And in a modest house in Prescott, Arizona, a 9-year-old girl slept with a smile on her face, knowing that tomorrow would be good and the day after that and all the days to come. Because sometimes the real monsters wear designer clothes and perfect smiles, and sometimes the angels ride Harley Davidsons.